Hi, everybody. Today I am going to talk about the question that I asked you for the discussion of Chapter 5, what's the worst mistake that humans ever made? I hope that this is going to be a quick little video. I don't intend to put any graphics in it or anything. Just want to address the question fairly concisely, but obviously you've probably figured out it can be kind of chatty. So I will do my best to make this quick and painless. So the question, as I said, was what's the worst mistake that humans have ever made? And several of you have pointed out in the discussion that you think that the worst mistake is a whole host of things, and a couple of you have actually identified it correctly, being agriculture. Now immediately you're saying, what? Agriculture? Hold on, wait, time out. I like the farmer's market. I see those bumper stickers all the time. No farm, no food. What's so wrong with farming? What's wrong with agriculture? So let's first consider why agriculture was important. Humans begin the transition to agriculture about 10,000 years ago. We're going to use that as our cutoff just to keep it simple, even though from place to place it varies a little bit. But 10,000 years ago is when we begin to transition to farming. And that has immediate consequences. It has consequences because what farming allows us to do is it allows us to produce a food surplus. Once we have a food surplus, it means that we have extra food so we can feed more mouths. So our population begins to grow. Now, I should say, and your book kind of points this out, that exactly why humans transitioned to farming isn't entirely clear, but it's quite likely that they did so in response to an immediate problem. Humans are really good at finding what we think are going to be short-term solutions to a problem, but we're not really good at thinking about the long-term consequences, and that's probably what happened with farming. Early human populations were growing as the Ice Age came to an end about 10,000 years ago. A lot of the plant and animal species that humans depended upon began to disappear, so they faced this dilemma of how to get enough food. And one of the solutions that they came up with probably unintentionally, was to more intensively exploit plant resources, which ultimately led to becoming farmers. So as I said, that allows us to produce more food so our population continues to grow. In fact, it grows even faster. And in another video, I'll explain why that happens. And ladies, I'm sorry, but it's kind of your fault. Not really. But I'll explain that in a separate video. So with a food surplus, what that also meant was that for the first time, not everybody had to be involved in the search or the quest for food. So you could have people specialize in other things, and you could actually pay them out of the food surplus. So maybe I'm going to become a weaver, or I'm going to be somebody who works on developing irrigation systems, or I'm going to be somebody who starts developing better tools, or whatever it may be. So you see task specialization occur. Really, every job, every career, every profession that we have today owes its existence to the emergence of farming 10,000 years ago, because directly or indirectly we get paid out of the food surplus that we're able to produce. You and I don't have to go out every morning and hunt or gather for the food that we're going to eat, beyond hunting and gathering at the local grocery store. So task specialization happens, and we're able to develop very complex societies. Again, modern human existence, the cities and states and countries and all the stuff that we have today doesn't exist absent agriculture. It's vital to our modern existence. I wouldn't be here without agriculture. I really kind of like the life that I have. I like being here. So I'm a beneficiary of agriculture. You wouldn't be here without agriculture. But the thing is, remember that in anthropology, we ask ourselves to be holistic, and we have to set aside ethnocentrism. We have to set aside our own selfish interests. If we really take an unbiased view of agriculture, what becomes readily apparent is that the negative consequences of agriculture far outweigh the benefits. Let me just run through a couple of them. First of all, humans do begin to produce more food, but overall our nutrition declines. The reason why is that when we switched to agriculture, as hunters and gatherers, we had exploited a whole host of food resources. Pretty much anything that we could eat in our environment, we would exploit. As farmers, we select a very few plant crops initially, and then animals, ones that will return a very high yield. They'll return a lot of material, but not plants that were necessarily nutritionally balanced or nutritionally beneficial. So with agriculture, you see a general decline in health. In fact, until the beginning of the 20th century, even in the United States, on average, people who lived in farming communities, their life expectancy was lower than people who continued to live as foragers. And in many parts of the world, that's still true today. So uh, we have nutrition problems. We have the appearance of malnutrition. We have the appearance of famine. Hunters and gatherers don't suffer from famine. If you're a hunter gatherer and you're in a valley and you run out of food, you pack your stuff up on your back and you go to the next valley and you find some more food. If you're a farmer and locusts come in and they eat all of your crops, you're kind of screwed because you can't go to the next valley because somebody's farming over there. You can't go anywhere else because you're tied to the land. If your crops are gone, your food surplus is gone, you're in for a really rough winter. Another consequence of agriculture is, believe it or not, you and I work a heck of a lot harder than foragers do. Even today, where only about 0.1% of the human population still live as dedicated foragers. And these are people who have been forced into marginal territories. It's not like 10,000 or 15,000 years ago where foragers pretty much went wherever they want. Now most of the best land is being used for farming or for industrialization or to build cities on and stuff like that. But even today, modern foragers work less hard, less hours than you and I do. I mean, if you think about all the hours you work in a given day for your job, your schoolwork, all of your chores, all the responsibilities that you have, how much does that total up? For a forager, it's about 3 to 4 hours a day, and the rest of their time is leisure time. Another consequence of agriculture is as our population begins to grow and it becomes this feedback where we start to become farmers, our population starts to get bigger, so we need to become more intensively farming so that we can make more food, produce more food to feed the growing population. As populations begin to grow, obviously that means that more and larger populations are competing against one another more intensively for limited resources. So we see an increase in the intensity of the competition and ultimately warfare on a large scale. Yes, I'll be clear, there is violence in hunter and gatherer communities. There's murder in hunter and gatherer communities, but it's not until agriculture that we as I say, we embrace those. I don't embrace is a bad word. That we begin practicing those things on both a regular and a large scale. Another obviously big consequence of agriculture is the impact that we're having on the environment. It's important to consider that, again, if we're holistic, we have to think not only about the impact of agriculture on humans ourselves, but what about the impact of agriculture on the planet as a whole? Overwhelmingly, agriculture has had very negative impacts on the planet. You think about where I live in Connecticut, right next door, there's a big farm. They grow a lot of corn. So they have, 100 acres that they grow, for all intents and purposes, one thing on, corn. If there was not a farm there, how many hundreds or thousands of species would be growing in that space? And how many animal species would be able to exploit it? What we see is that humans have become more intensively agricultural, particularly in the past, say, 150 years, 200 years with the Industrial Revolution and the transition to industrial farming and the widespread use of chemical fertilizers and things like that. The impact on the environment has been cataclysmic. Some of you may have noticed there was a story that came out recently that the Earth is likely to be in. They haven't decided to officially say it's in, but we're likely to be in a mass extinction event. And what's different about this mass extinction compared to the mass extinctions that have come before, there have been 5 before, the last one was when the dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago, is that this one isn't caused by a natural event or cataclysmic event. This one's being caused by humans. It's estimated that in your lifetime, yours, by the time you are in your 70s or 80s, half of the species that are alive today on the planet will be gone. And almost entirely, that is because of human activity. So, because of farming and the way it has enabled the human species to grow and to spread, we are having this cataclysmic effect on the planet as a whole. And of course, linked very closely to that extinction event from the human perspective is the consequence of overpopulation. We now have over 7 billion people on the planet, and that leads to a lot of issues with crime, violence, disease, a whole host of problems, environmental degradation, pollution, climate change, all of that stuff, and all of it is a direct consequence of agriculture. So, to kind of sum up, as I said, if we are honest with ourselves and we put this on a scale and we say, here are the benefits of agriculture, here are the consequences, the negative consequences of agriculture, overwhelmingly those negative consequences will tip the scale to indicate that agriculture really was a horrible mistake. And really, I say a horrible mistake with the understanding that, again, it's probably not something that humans did intentionally. They didn't understand the long-term consequences of it. But literally every single modern problem that we have today, from climate change to warfare to nuclear weapons to disease to social stratification and sexual violence, all that stuff is a consequence of the changes that resulted from agriculture, because you don't find those things in hunter and gatherer communities. If you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to respond to this video in the discussion. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. Have a good day.